All right, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, Elohim of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want to say peace to you in the name of his son, Yehoshua HaMashiach, who we call Jesus the Christ. It's always a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to bring a message contained in his word, and never do I count it as a light thing to do so. In today's message, I want to deal with a very common misconception, and that misconception is that there is a such thing as a Christian Sabbath. Okay. When we go to Torah in particular, Exodus the 20th chapter, we read very clearly about the Sabbath. The fourth commandment reads in Exodus 20, in verse 8, beginning at verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. And then the text takes you all the way back to the beginning. It says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, which means he sanctified it. So if he did that, you read that in Genesis, the second chapter, that took place. And we read in one of the 10 commandments, the fourth commandment is to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And just so we understand what else are we supposed to do on that day besides ceasing from all our labor, Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, when it lays out instruction on the weekly Sabbath as well as on the annual Sabbath, it tells us concerning the weekly Sabbath the following. Leviticus 23 and verse 3 reads, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest. And holy convocation, you shall you shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. So he tells you about the Shabbat and which Shabbat or Sabbath means to rest. And then he said you're supposed to hold a holy convocation. A holy convocation is a sanctified gathering. Okay. That's supposed to happen every seventh day. And we understand that the day in the Bible does not begin at 12 a.m. or at midnight. No, it begins when the sun sets. Okay. It's from evening to evening. The day actually begins in the evening, and you can actually see a change going from one day into another. If you look at the 12 a.m. Concept of it being a new day, nothing's new at 12 a.m. That's just like nothing's new in the dead of winter on January 1st, but rather the new year actually begins in the spring. Okay, so we know this. The Bible is very clear on this. There was no misunderstanding about when the Sabbath was. So now the question becomes, is there a Christian Sabbath? Well, when you look in the Bible, what do you find? You find that the word Christian, they were first called Christians in Antioch. And the believers being referred to as Christians at Antioch was was a type of epithet. Okay. So now, what were the Christians doing in the first century? Were they keeping Sunday as their Christian Sabbath? Because that's what you hear. There's a Sabbath of the Jews and there's a Sabbath of the Christians. But when you read, going back to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, we didn't read this part, but if we go up just a little bit prior to what we did read when he said about the Sabbath, he says in verse 2, speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. So it's not like the Israelites came up with this. This was given unto them by the Most High, who gave it to Moshe to give unto the people to keep. But now, were they doing something different in the first century? This is Acts the 17th chapter, and notice what it says here in verse 1. It says, now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. Now pay attention. I want to read this because Paul is so often misused. His writings are misused to perpetrate false doctrine. One being that the law is no more. That would include the Sabbath law. But people fail to consider that if that's done away with, why all of a sudden are you keeping Sunday? And furthermore, why not Tuesday? Why not Wednesday? Why not Thursday? It says, now notice what Paul's custom was. It says, and Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them and 3 Sabbath days, reasoned with them out of the scriptures. So he went in on what day? On the Shabbat, on the seventh day, which begins on Friday evening and ends Saturday, what we call Saturday evening. It's another side note. All the names of the days in the Bible just receive a number. The Sabbath is the Shabbat. Okay, so now we know that after Christ's death, you have what? You have Paul the apostle still observing the Sabbath day. You can further read, and what is he? He's not just doing that, he also observes Pentecost. I'm gonna read this here in Acts the 20th chapter, because this whole notion that the feast days are done away with, it becomes more and more uh, asinine once you realize what the Bible actually says. This is Acts 20 and verse 16. It said, for Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus because he would not spend the time in Asia, for he hasted, if it were possible for him, to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost. And that's an annual feast day. So you have the weekly Sabbath and you have annual Sabbaths. Paul here, first century, after the death of and resurrection of the Mashiach, the Christ, Yehoshua, he's still observing them. Let's see what our Messiah did. This is Luke, the 4th chapter. Luke, the 4th chapter. And we will pick it up in Luke 4 and verse 16. Now, what was Christ doing? It says in verse 16, he came to Nazareth, referring to Yehoshua or Jesus, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. Now, I said that was Paul's custom when we read it in Acts, and the text specifically says manner, but it's saying the same thing, right? So, what did Christ do? Christ went as his custom was, meaning this is what he did. He observed the Sabbath, as written in the law. He broke none of the laws, therefore, he would not violate the Sabbath. So now, but some will say, well, that's done away with when Christ died and was resurrected. Well, then why is Paul still keeping it? That's something you need to ask yourself. You have been lied to, and it is up to you, quite frankly, and I'm speaking to those who are continuing to observe Sunday worship as if it's written in the Bible. I'm here to tell you today, it is not. You do not find this in the Bible. That they and one of the things that they say to justify this is they say that, well, Christ, you see, what happened was, you see, Christ, he died on Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. Okay. And that's why we keep Sunday. Praise the Lord. Okay. That is inaccurate. I'm going to pick it up in John, the gospel according to John, chapter 19, and point out where they get this false doctrine from. They misinterpret this to substantiate this false doctrine. So they said in John 19 and 31, after the Messiah said, it is finished, he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So now they will use this and misinterpret that, because you have to qualify what Sabbath you're talking about. He died on the Passover. It wasn't just a it wasn't a weekly Sabbath. Actually, he died on a Wednesday of that week. Okay, but now where did they? And just so we know this, just pick it up. Let's just pick it up in at Matthew 26 and verse 2. When did he die? It says in verse 2, you know that after, this is the Messiah speaking. He said, you know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. He is the Passover lamb, as it is written. Jesus Christ, our Passover lamb, is sacrificed for us. As it is written, John the Baptist said, behold, the Lamb of God which taketh away the sin of the world. When you look at the ordinance pertaining to the Passover, it is showing you Christ. It goes through a trial period, just like Christ, and it has to be a perfect lamb, just like Christ. And you must come up under his blood, just like Christ. So now here in John 19, when it says Sabbath day, they say, oh, he went in on Good Friday. And then he rose Easter Sunday. That's all false doctrine. And that is mainly out of the Protestant churches. The Catholics will tell you, no, we changed the day. That's what the Catholics will say. They will say they changed the day, and because they had the power to do it, and because everybody followed it, showed that it was legitimate. Just because everybody's going the wrong way doesn't mean it's the right way. As your mother probably told you at one time in your life, in your young foolishness, as I was told, if everybody jump off a bridge, you're going to jump to, right? So what does the Bible actually say? Well, one thing is clear is that Sunday is not the day. And another thing that is clear, you cannot say that he died Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. Let's go to Matthew the 12th chapter. Matthew the 12th chapter. And I'm going to pick it up at verse 38. It says, then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. And there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas, or Jonah. So now they're looking for a sign to verify, to confirm who he is. He said, yeah, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. And there shall none be given unto it but the sign of the prophet Jonas. He goes on to tell you in verse 40, for as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. You cannot get 3 days and 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. Not with the new math, not with the old math, not with any kind of math. It's just not possible, right? So it couldn't be that he died Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. Let's go to Matthew the 28th chapter. Because when we read about the account of them coming to, of believers coming to the sepulcher, notice what it says in Matthew 28 and verse 1. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, okay, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulcher. You might see the word Sabbath when you see it in different places. He was resurrected on the Sabbath. He went in on Wednesday night. So you got Wednesday night, Thursday day, Thursday night, Friday day, Friday night, Saturday day. 3 days and 3 nights. It's not rocket science. But if you're talking about Good Friday and Easter Sunday, Friday night, Saturday day, Saturday night, and then he's right there. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So now I want to share something with you. I want to share something with you concerning this this notion of where, so where, because the question is, so where does this come from? Okay, so let's take a look. So now this is from, so where is it, where did this Sunday worship come from? Well, let's point out some things. First of all, why is this day significant? This is from Eadie's Biblical Encyclopedia, 1872 edition, page 561. It says, quote, Sunday was a name given by the heathens to the first day of the week, because it was, when it says heathens, it just means people that don't know God, like how you would see Goyim or Gentiles, because it was the day on which they worship the sun. See, all those days have a name, usually in honor of some deity. For example, Sunday is in the day, Dia Solis, or the day of the sun, right? Monday is in honor of the moon. Tuesday is Twi. Wednesday is Wooden. Thursday is Thor. Friday is Freya. Saturday is Saturn. Okay. So it says again, Sunday was the name given by the heathens to the first day of the week because it was the day on which they worshiped the sun. The seventh day was blessed and hallowed by God Himself, and He requires His creatures to keep it holy to Him. The commandment is of universal and perpetual obligation. The Creator blessed the seventh day, declared it to be a day above all days, a day on which His favor should assuredly rest. So long, then, as man exists and the world around him endures, does the law of the early Shabbat or Sabbath remain. It cannot be set aside so long as its foundations last. It is not the Jewish Sabbath, properly so called, which is ordained in the fourth commandment. In the whole of that injunction, there is no Jewish element any more than there is in the third commandment or the sixth. Let's go to the next slide. So this is from Encyclopedia Mythica, from Origins of the Names of the Days. The names of the days are in some cases derived from Teutonic deities or such as in Romance languages from Roman deities. The early Romans around the first century used Saturday as the first day of the week as the worshiping of the sun increased. The sun's day advanced from position of the second day to the first day of the week. And Saturday became the seventh day. Now that's what they would understand. The days is from Friday evening to Saturday evening. Okay, Sunday. The name comes from the Latin dies solis, meaning sun's day, the name of a pagan Roman holiday. It is also called Dominica in Latin, the day of God. The Roman, but their God is the sun. We're going to find that out. Romance languages derived from the ancient Latin language, such as French, Spanish, and Italian, retain the root. Old English, son and dog, right? French, you see these names, Spanish, German, etc. So now, this is from Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of All Ages. He talks about the universal worship of the sun. This is an archetype. This is something that is universal amongst all peoples on around the earth because they observed what the sun does. The sun gives life. What they did not acknowledge is the one who put the sun out there. So it says the adoration of the sun was one of the earliest and most natural forms of religious expression. And they eventually just personified the sun that they were worshiping. Complex modern theologies are merely involvements and amplifications of this simple Aboriginal belief. To them, Aboriginal peoples, he, the sun, was the innate fire of bodies, the fire of nature, author of life, heat, and ignition. He was to them the efficient cause of all generation, for without him there was no movement, no existence, no form. He was to them immense, indivisible, imperishable, and everywhere present. It was their need of light, of his creative energy, that was felt by all men, and nothing was more fearful to them than his absence, right? Darkness, ultimately, you would have light if you didn't have the sun. You wouldn't have life if you did not have the sun. So it says his beneficent influences caused his identification with the principle of good and the Brahma of the Hindus and Mithras of the Persians and Atham, Amun, Ptah, and Osiris of the Egyptians, the Baal of the Chaldeans, the Adonai of the Phoenicians, the Adonis and Apollo of the Greeks became but personifications of the sun, the regenerating principle, image of fecundity, which perpetuates and rejuvenates the world's existence. So that notion of life giving through the rays of the sun is a principle shining as light on the earth and bringing about life, like a man entering a woman and bringing about life. This is the same principle, which was personified with the sun. That's why the sun is always, for the most part, always masculine. The earth is usually feminine. The moon with the cycle is usually feminine. These are principles that they are acknowledging through observation and personification. The problem with this is that it is pagan because the principle is not Elohim. Rather, Elohim is Elohim. So now, how did it become that Christians keep it? This is one of the first laws pertaining to this, because what you had is a co-opting. What you had was an intermingling of these pagan practices into what arose as the universal church, the Catholic Church, that has indoctrinated the earth with the wine of fornication. She is the mother whore in Revelation. But now this is from Codex Justinianus. Justinianus, Philip Schaeff's History of the Christian Church, Volume 3, page 380. This is what Constantine. It says, on the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed. In the country, however, persons engaged in agriculture may freely and lawfully continue their pursuits, because it often happens that another day is not so suitable for grain sowing or for vine planting, lest by neglecting the proper moment for such operations, the bounty of heaven should be lost. Given the 7th day of March, Crispus and Constantine began councils, each of them for the second time. This is AD 321. This was in March 321 AD. Now, the Council of Laodicea, AD 337, Canon 29. This is quoted in C.J. Heffley's History of the Councils of the Church, Volume 2, page 316. Christians, quote, Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday in the original Sabbath, shall not be idle on the Sabbath, but shall work on that day. So they are commanding that you violate the Shabbat. But the Lord's day, they shall especially honor. So the Lord's day, they call it Sunday, but that's the day of the sun. It's not the Lord's day in the Bible. The Lord's day in the Bible is actually referring to a time when the Lord interferes directly in the affairs of man around the time of his coming. It is not Sunday, but this is what they call the Lord's day because that was their son is their Lord. So he says, however, if they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out or anathema, excommunicated from Christ. Or these heathen gonna excommunicate you from the Mashiach when they are of Satan. This is James Gibbons' Faith of Our Fathers. Remember when I said to you that Catholics, they tell you that they just changed it? He says, quote, this is page 89 of this text, quote, you may, on Sunday worship, you may read from the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and you will not find a single line authorizing the sanctification of Sunday. You know, sometimes you hear people say, well, Paul broke bread on that day. So, yeah, you eat every day unless you're fasting or just don't have any food. What does that have to do with the day that he sanctified? And it points to the rest to come. That's another thing I haven't gotten into, is that it points to a rest. It is prophetic, the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. Right? That's we're striving to enter into that rest. And the author of Hebrews tells us. But nevertheless, it said the scriptures enforce the religious observance of Saturday. Notice what he says next: a day which we never sanctified. They have sanctified the day that was dedicated to sun worship. So now, even in the Converse Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, third edition, you see these questions and answers. Question, which is the Sabbath day? Answer, Saturday is the Sabbath day. Question, why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? Answer, we observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church in the Council of Laodicea transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. Not because he died on Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. Not because there's a so-called Christian Sabbath. It is because these wicked people uh changed it, and you cannot change the Sabbath. You don't have the authority, the power to do that. But this is what they have told most people, and most people have gone along with this wholesale. And with that, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you that we at the Household of Faith meet every Sabbath, every Shabbat at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Geary, Indiana at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel. We also meet every Sabbath in Stafford, Virginia at the Red Roof Inn at 153 Garrisonville Road in Stafford, Virginia at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer